Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, welcome everybody. First item on our agenda tonight is approval of the agenda, and I do have one change that I'll read in on personnel recommendations. Anybody have any other changes to the agenda tonight? Otherwise, I need a motion.
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Munn.
Roll call.
Second by Drake.
Good job, Gene.
Mrs. Conway.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Munda.
Yes.
And Mr. Drake.
Yes.
I have 6 yes. Motion carries.
Doesn't look like we have any recognition. Sign-up book. Has anybody signed in on the book to address the board? No? Doesn't mean if anybody would like to, they could if they'd like. So, no. President's report. The only item I've got tonight is it's never too late. One of the takeaways from the conference we had last fall, and I've talked a little bit with Dr. Algram about it, and he's kind of run with it with Gene, is we're going to give, in order to just continue to drive efficiency in our meeting, we're going to look at developing a consent agenda. So I couldn't articulate exactly which agenda items can belong in that part of the agenda, but essentially you can take action on a number of items at one time with one vote rather than going through each one individually.
We had done that for many years, and it was very efficient.
Yeah, it was just something that I had picked up in one of the training sessions that I had attended, so I think we're going to try to start in July.
Start in July?
Yeah, so,
Did you lose your iPad?
no, it's right here.
Sorry, I asked.
No, I'm still connected. Are you connected? Okay.
And board members, if you read through that information on the consent agenda, if you have any questions on it, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, anything can be pulled from the consent agenda, as you vote on the collective group of other items. So it's not necessarily any harder than it is now to pull something out. So as you read through that information, if you have any questions, please let us know. And we'll devise it for July and see how that goes, and have some reflection afterwards. If it seems to go well, we can keep moving forward.
We'll move on then to committee reports. We have an update from our policy committee tonight.
We do. Thanks to Ms. Conway and Mr. Drake for attending our policy meeting with a number of our administrators. And we do have a first reading for the board tonight. I do want to make 2 edits in the list as I read through them, so board members don't have to later in terms of what we reviewed. But overall, it was a very good meeting, and there were some 5-year reviews in there. Those are very mundane and a lot of times just little edits, if any, from press. But also we think we talked to our policy committee about probably having our next meeting on August 21st at Eau Plaine. We're going to have that meeting over at Ms. Bertola's building. So we will also have a policy meeting prior to that, because we will do have a number of things with a change in personnel. July 1 with some of our administrators, some of our policies are triggered then we have to get new names recognized in. So that's one piece. But the policies that were reviewed at that meeting were 4:40, incurring debt, 5:170, copyright at D121, 4:80, accounting and audits, 6:60, curriculum content, 6:130, program for the gifted, 6:135, accelerated placement program, 7:50, school admissions and student transfers to and from non-district schools, 7:340, student records, 2:105, ethics and gift band, 2:170, the procurement of architectural, engineering, and land surveying services. There's a correction, 4:20 is fund balances. That's actually at D121 with some changes that we put in there. There's the waiver, 4:140, waiver of student fees, 6:10, educational philosophy and objectives, 6:30, organization of instruction at D121, 6:120, education of children with disabilities, 6:190 is actually extracurricular and co-curricular activities at D121, because we added some language on the back page about IHSA academic guidelines, if you will. 6:220 is bring your own technology program. 6:230 is our library media program. 6:240 field trips at D121. 6:250 community resource persons and volunteers at D121. 7:330 student use of buildings for equal access. And 8:25 advertising and distributing materials in schools provided by non-school related entities. So those policies are up for a first reading for the board tonight. Yeah, let's see. A few other just kind of odds and ends things. Just as a reminder, I mentioned that we will have our August 21st meeting at Eau Plaine. Our next meeting is July the 17th, and that will be here. We also have, I'm looking ahead right now, our tentative date for our strategic planning session is September 11th. We were again trying, if we can, trying to find a night that we can have a very quick business meeting of the board if we need to pay some bills and things of that nature, but then have our strategic planning session immediately following that. So we'll start tentatively working down that road and trying to make sure that we are getting that information out to some of the people that we would normally invite to that. I also wanted to just communicate that we got a reminder early this week that our 33 of our students are in Baltimore for the FBLA National Conference. So that's obviously they'll be meeting through July 1, and there's some information on www.fbla-pbl.org where they show some results and things of that nature. So obviously congratulations and good luck to the students that are there this week. I think there was one other item. I know what it is. So I'm going to have my two other items very quickly. We're also in the process of just about coming up with our second semester warrant connection. We usually try to get that out right after the turn of the fiscal year, so sometime early next week we'll probably send that out to our staff and community, highlighting some of our second semester highlights of students and staff. And we also are at the process now of starting to go into our agreement with the village on the joint newsletter, keeping posted, and we'll start to put together some articles of significance for that publication. And the board has supported that effort in terms of financially knowing that would cost us approximately, I was going to say $3,000 maybe, let's estimate, just to go into that venture. But obviously I think it's well read, and I think it's a nice collaborative effort. We also have in your board packet our normal monthly reports for the month of May in regards to attendance, enrollment, discipline, and staffing and gifts to the district. Starting next month, our staffing report that will be in there will be our FY19 tentative staffing report, which again, we'll modify as need be. But we'll obviously next month start to make sure that we're tracking staff in the 18-19 year. And we have a treasurer's report, don't we, Carol?
Carol, why are you smiling?
Yes.
When,
increase in our general state aid payments in the last 2 months.
and when did that start? Did that start in 18? That started not, yeah, it started in 18 because they passed the budget.
Yeah,
Okay.
we received our first increase in state aid in April. So for, the board that probably isn't aware of this, general state aid is the one category that they pay religiously on twice a month. And so what they did take is some of our categorical state aid by special ed personnel and special ed extraordinary, which are very iffy in when they got paid, and they converted them to general state aid, which is paid on a very regular twice-a-month basis. So the one piece that that does is it allows us to plan more, because we don't have timing, timing irregularities, or as much timing irregularity. So going forward, that will be a positive thing planning-wise. So that, that was a positive issue. The state of Illinois did pass a budget at the end of May, first time in years. It is providing more funding to schools. I have not seen anything on what that means to Warren. We just filed our annual average daily attendance for 3 months, which is part of the general state aid calculation. We're down by 150 students in that general state aid average daily attendance number. So that was filed last week. What, in terms of our budget for 17-18, expenditures should come in where we planned. We originally, you want me to go ahead and talk about that, John?
That was going to be my next question. I mean, it's not where we want to be, but it's where we expected to be. We ended up just a little over 3 million negative for the year again. Is that what I'm reading here? 57 to 60?
What we budgeted was a $3.1 million operating deficit for the year. So expenditures should be on track, possibly slightly over, but they're trending very well from what we budgeted. And I think we did a really good job budgeting our expenditures. From the revenue side, it's all going to depend if we get that fourth categorical by August 31st. The way the trend has gone is, right now we're seeing a 3 to 5 month delay in getting that categorical aid. We have to receive it by August 31st to record it as revenue. If we get that revenue, additional revenue, we've received 5 payments instead of 4, and then our operating deficit I would expect to be in the 1.8 to $2 million range. So we would have picked up a little bit, but what this trend line shows, and this is what we've been showing to the board every month, the blue line is this year's fund balance, the dotted line is last year's fund balance. And these two little blips right here and here are, again, just how what month we recorded some audit adjustments in. So I take those two out, but what you can see here is the blue line, which is our 17-18 fund balance, continues to track under our last year fund balance. So fund balance, that would be the third consecutive decline in fund balance. What we want to see, obviously, is a break even, so we don't diminish any more of our resources, and we're at a point where we should end the year about 25% reserve, 25% of our expenditures in reserve from an operating fund standpoint.
That's what the 14.6, it's 25%?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what the board policy states, and that's what, the board has expressed that they want to stay in an even keel. If we want to go to the next,
They want the 10?
these bars here just show the different fund balances. I just ignore those. So I just look at the total line.
And I know we passed the resolution to kick off the next budgeting cycle.
Right,
And I always have a hard time understanding because the year is in the middle, and
right.
when does that kick off for us?
So our
September.
new fiscal year starts July 1st. So in the strategic plan, the board had stated that they wanted to maintain a minimum fund balance of 35%. So we would be right at what that target is. So we've done a 5-year projection for the board, and I think we presented that in the finance committee that was open to, was an open meeting. But in that, we projected what, kind of on a current scenario, what we would look like for the next 5 years. So that's what we've been working with the board to, look at trends, look at CPI, look at a lot of things, just this plan for the next 5 years. And that's really the important part, is that we're planning for 5 years out and making sure that we can do as much, look at enrollment, do as much as we can, and
Hopefully the CPI, we don't go back to these .6 and .5 years and stuff. I mean,
right.
that was
So we've got
brutal.
another over 2% CPI, and, it really all depends, like I think we've always seen, December oil prices is usually what has the greatest effect on CPI. But this being a good economy, I would hope that that would be more.
What could tariffs do to?
That is a very good question. So they can have a big effect on CPI. So really, CPI is dependent on the economic growth, gross national product. And if we're seeing, we just heard about Harley Davidson, whether that's true or not. But if it starts causing a trade war, and we're not seeing the economic growth that they predicted, then you could possibly see some effect on CPI. But, there's just so many factors that go into that. So,
Great.
anything I forgot to mention? But
Like I said, it's,
when Mike does June treasurer's report, I'm sure it'll be in a lot of great detail for everyone.
What I was gonna have board members think about is, if there's any, as we transition with Mike, if there's any slides or particular pieces that are on the dashboard that are more helpful than others, that, for the board, because Carol highlights a number of different things in there. Obviously, if there are some that are immediate, that will help Mike in July kind of guide him, just, please let us know so that we can at least kind of figure out which pieces of those dashboard are most beneficial.
One other piece, while I'm up here, we did get audited by the State Board of Ed for our title grants. No adjustment to any of the title grants, and we're getting a refund back on our transportation claim from 1560. So that was very positive, and that's over. So we're glad, we shouldn't see him back for 5 or 2 years.
Carol?
Thank you for letting me retire and do that last treasurer's report. I had to do it otherwise.
And thank you for putting up with all of the questions I've asked you. I don't know how long I've been asking you questions, but I really do appreciate you taking all the extra time
Thank you.
to teach me, at least to try to teach me.
Thank you. Well, we all have things that we enjoy doing. All our teachers enjoy teaching. I enjoy numbers, and so it's never an inconvenience.
All the years of financial recognition, and balancing that budget for so many years, some tough years, but you have done a fantastic job.
But I take it you're not going to miss doing the monthly treasurer's report. Okay. Anything else in the superintendent's report? Okay, we'll move on to new business. First item is the approval of the resolution for adopting prevailing wage. So I recognize this one. This is an annual thing.
This is annual. They've made some modifications since September 2017. Prevailing wage came out. We have not seen any modifications or a June 2018 prevailing wage update, so we're going to adopt September 2017 with modifications.
Questions? Otherwise, I need a motion.
I'll move to approve the resolution adopting the prevailing wage for laborers, workmen, mechanics employed for the work at Warren Township High School District 121 for 2018-19.
Second.
Roll call.
Munda, second by Walls. Mr.
Yes.
Wilson?
Yes.
Yes.
Walls?
Yes.
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next item is approval of the paperback book bid.
It's an annual bid, so we summarize, I think we had about six vendors, so we summarized by item, which was the lowest responsible bidder for you. And there's a tabulation sheet and the summary awards. We're going to ask that you approve the vendors as recommended.
I move to approve the paperback book bid and award the bid to recommended vendors as presented for 2018, 2019.
Second.
Motion by Conway, second by Munda. Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
I have 6 yes, motion carries.
Next item is approval of resolution for resolution of designated interest.
So each year, if you do not adopt a resolution allowing interest to retain its character, it becomes principal. So this resolution allows us to distinguish interest which can be transferred to other funds. This is a standard resolution.
Questions, anyone?
I'll move to approve the resolution of the Board of Education of Warren Township High School District 121, Lake County, Illinois, designating interest in the education operations, maintenance, debt service, transportation, and working cash funds.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Munda, second by Wilson. Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Walls? Mrs. Wilson? Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next item is approving the transfer of funds.
This is a resolution authorizing an accounting transfer of funds. This allows us to transfer funds out of the education fund for our capital lease on computers, and this is the last payment for that. And out of our O&M fund for the debt payments, debt certificates on the land. These have been budgeted, so this would be the formal resolution for the auditors to allow us to approve.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing accounting transfers to debt service funds to implement state regulations.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Munda. Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next item is approval of the list of depositories in accordance with Board Policy 4:30.
So we have 5 financial institutions that we bank or invest with. Those are listed for you, and we would like to meet the terms of the board policy by designating these institutions.
I do recognize the Lake Forest Bank on there. I got down there the day after you gave me that, so. Okay. Okay. Questions, anyone?
I move to approve the list of depositories as presented in accordance with Board Policy 4.30.
Second. Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Drake. Mrs. Wilson? Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
And Mr. Drake?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is first reading of the district board policies. Dr. Algrim.
motion.
Yeah.
Just informational.
Yeah, just informational, thank you. The scrolling thing is still locked for me, so
Yeah, mine
you
too.
have to go up and down. Next item is approval of hiring recommendations per Exhibit A. So here's the one item I had changed. So I move to approve Exhibit A hiring recommendations number 284 through 291 as posted. And in addition to that, 292, Ryan Anderson, resignation. 293, Christine Flowers, retirement. 294, Marshall Robertson, retirement. 295, Shannon Doring, new hire. 296, Anastasia Leach, new hire. 297, Sean Pitts, new hire. 298, Andrew Pollock, new hire. 299, Brittany Tangler, new hire. And number 300, Appendix B, rehire of outside coaches, rehire.
Second.
Did I miss?
Can you just read that name? That was the name that needs to be read.
Oh, sorry. Under the Appendix B was Sarah, head girls water polo coach. Thank you. Was at the end.
Second.
Roll call. Thanks, Mike.
Motion by Drake, second by Munda. Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Next item is approval of the payment of the bills. I know I didn't submit this question at 3 o'clock Monday. One I noted in there was $185,000 for the AP exam fee.
So what
And there's a
we,
reimbursement that goes on there, right? I'm good.
so we've collected, a little over 200,000, which pays for the proctors.
And we actually, so this year, the AP fees went up, and so we kind of match what they're doing. I think this year they're about $2,000 above what we collected. So that, what impacts that usually is we try to be as close as we can as possible, but with the number, depends on the number of proctors that we need to do the combinations testing, which is the general size of some of the tests that we take. So this year we used, last year we used 110 proctor slots, and this year we only used 102.
The money we're collecting is each student pays to take the exam, right? Do we ever run into situations where students can't afford it?
Yes, so if they're qualified for federal free and reduced lunch, the College Board reduces that fee, and then we use some of our money in our title grants to, this year we use Title IV grant money to cover the remaining portion of that. And then if there's students that don't necessarily meet those requirements, we are able to, through toll registration, set up payment plans and work with those families to make sure those students are able to take care of paying the fees. And we allow parents now, since toll registration offers that service, we're able to accommodate them. We have them usually sign up in January. They're able to make payments on their account all the way up through the week before testing starts.
Awesome.
I'll move to approve the payment of bills in the amount of $5,142,407.12.
Second. Roll call.
Motion by Munda, second by Drake. Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
Letter I is approval of the regular meeting minutes and executive session minutes from our June 12th meeting. Questions, comments? Otherwise, I need a motion.
Move to approve the regular meeting minutes and executive session minutes of June 12th, 2018.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Conway. Mr. Munda?
Yes.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Drake? 6 yes, motion carries.
And we have one item under old business. We get a solar project update.
So we wanted to make sure the board had an update. As a reminder, the last couple of years, in a combination of finance committee meetings and most recently this year in some alternative energy committee meetings, and at some board meetings, the board has thoroughly processed and learned about solar energy projects and different types of projects and different places for projects. And early on last summer, did a lot of conversation about where those projects may be in regards to land mounts or roof mounts and the impact that has on property that, our Stern School Road property, how it impacts our roofs here, things of that nature. So just as a reminder, the board's been through a number of discussions of this over time. We did at the April meeting, at our second April meeting this year, the board, we did have a conditional agreement to go into, start that process, or at least start it more formally process. And I know Carol was part of the piece of that were the conditions upon which Carol was going to work with our district attorney as well as Performance Services and their attorney. And I know she had an updated conversation with them last week about the status of that contract and to see how we were going on resolving some of the assurances that the board had asked for in that contract. So I'm going to let Carol, if you want to start with just that conversation, we'll go from there.
Steve Rickard from Hodges and Louisi has been working on this contract with Russ Webb, who's the attorney from Performance Services. So to remind the board, at the April 26th meeting, we had several contingencies that a contract would be only be valid. One of those was financing, condition on receiving the SREC credits and incentives to reduce the financing amount. That was very important to the board. Regulatory approvals, certification of the energy savings by a certified architect, which is a requirement of the state of Illinois, and that we do not make any payments until construction actually occurs. So my conversation with the two attorneys and with Kurt Hintz last week, we think we've got, in fact, we've got the wording on how to incorporate the finance contingencies in the SRECs. And how that would work is that we would only provide in the authority, in the project, there would only be authority to move forward if we were limited in the amount we borrowed, and this would allow us to take into account the SREC. So the entire project was about a $7.4 million project. Assuming, say, we got $3 million in SRECs and incentives, the board would be borrowing $4.4 million, and we would have not to exceed authority of $4.4 million, for example. So this would allow us to say, yeah, those SRECs got to come through and those incentives come through, because we are only going to borrow this much money to make the project viable. The other part that I want to remind the board is borrowing a lower amount is very critical to success, because we take those savings from 100% energy recovery at Almond, and we spend about $310,000 a year on electricity costs, and we take that payment and make the debt service payment. So from an operating standpoint, it's cash neutral. We save electricity and we take those savings and we pay off the debt. So this debt has to be structured so your energy savings pays off a reduced What can also happen then is if we get more SRECs, we would have flexible debt structure that you pay off the debt faster. So the life of a solar panel, 20 years, the goal would be to pay that off in, say, 8 years, for example, or 10 years. And that way, we're still and some deregulation in the electric business. So we're locked in until 2020 on electricity rate, but that's how the piece works and how the solar project is successful. Is that any energy savings is used to pay your debt for that year, and the debt is structured as such.
Well, can you also, I'll go up there in a second, but can you also remind the board of the conversation after you had met, because there were two pieces about you went over and met with the county, just about from their end, some things that they were recommending from there, just to make sure that we review that. Well, in terms of, after they recommended just that after things get going, that we have some public forums here after that point in time. So can you just go through that conversation they shared with the board a few months ago?
I don't know if the board remembers, but about, I would say 30 to 40 days ago, we met with members of all, in fact, Mike was with me, we met with members of all different areas of Lake County government. Department of Transportation, their building people, their zoning people, just to get all their feedback on, you know, pieces that Warren should be aware of and Warren should plan for. One of the recommendations they had was an information meeting. So the way this process goes is once the contract gets signed, this whole project goes out for a public bid. So then we will have final pricing, we will have final engineering and architectural drawings that we can actually show the public. We will have the engineers and the PSI be able to talk and really explain exactly what the project's going to look like. So what we're supposed to do is get a 45-day letter that really goes through the minutes of all this meeting, and we've already taken action on some of the recommendations they have, one of which is to identify the trees on our property. Some trees you have to retain, or if they have to be moved, you've got to replace them, groves of trees, certain types of trees. So we've had an arborist come out and do that, but really the most critical piece they wanted us to do is to have that information meeting with the public, and I would assume, you know, it'd be at a board meeting or other open forum, just so they, you know, they and the board would have the opportunity to answer any of the questions that the public or the staff or anybody else might have on how this would proceed and the rationale and the opportunities.
I'll remind the board of some of those numbers in a second. The important thing was, some of the other important factors where we had discussions about the fact that we learned through the process that those ground mounts obviously produce, just because of the angle that they're in at, produce much more energy than like roof mounts would, and it also keeps the project then independent from our roofs here, which was an issue of ours, especially because we have roof work that needs to be done to a degree. Also, the fact that we looked at locations on our campus and realized that along Gages Lake Road, that our property along there is right now pretty unusable for us in terms of where we are at, yet it's contingent, it's actually on our property, so having it there and not having to transport energy is a great advantage too. So over time, that location was there. And the numbers that are on the board, so those are ground mounts along Gages Lake Road, is what that solar project is. And the numbers that our board represent, would represent the maximum amount of possible production from that, I think, is what Kurt had shared with the board, meaning that after they do the engineering and after they look at the reality of making sure they're not too close to, you know, either the road or our property or things that we're already doing, obviously the project might get carved back a little bit for a number of reasons. But in terms of the overarching projections, just because I'm not sure everybody can see that, one of the pieces that were up there, and I want to show the second slide in a second. There's pieces to this financing. So I know this is a lot of numbers on this board, but just as a remember, when Carol mentioned that 7.8 million, that is a big price tag. But originally what the board was realizing was we're already spending $300,000 a year just for our energy here. Right? And so the piece of just how much bills we're paying just to annually, how much we're paying to ComEd just to get energy is an important part of this piece. There are the solar renewable energy credits. That's this column here. That represents approximately $4.5 million. And if you want to think of it, incentives to move forward with solar projects, which is all over the place right now. So this column, in terms of a 30-year deal, was starting at $300,000 with some increases. That alone came to about $14 million in potential costs that we would have as a district, just, you know, for all in, and the SREC income of same time, he brought out that there's other rebates out there for people to move along and start to get in the energy game. At this time, there was a smart inverter rebate that Curry told us about, that he said might be very much in play as well. So that's where that 729,000 came from, just as additional incentives. So if you want to think of it, those columns together are incentives. This is if, originally what we had had is if you do borrow, obviously $7.8 million is a cost to do that, right? There's the financing cost to do that, which is why at the bottom of this column, it does work out to be 10 million or so in overall cost, right? And then this piece here was annually, these savings that would be there, right? Ranging, obviously ranging in numbers, but at the end of the day, over the 30 years, you were looking at a $9.37 million gain, if you will, financial gain. So there's a piece of that that's just overarching, that there is the piece of the SRECs and the incentives. But what we were looking at was, wait a second, even independent of that, look at how much money we're spending generally. Anyway, this, by the way, in full production, would generate 112% of the energy that we're spending at home, and which we're allowed to do because we have obviously more energy costs than with our wind gamut. So I wanted to show you that the one thing that we were trying to get at, though, was this initially was what we were thinking. It still is a good plan. But the thing we didn't like about it is we were like, well, here's an example of where we're getting some monies up front, right? Like relatively early on, and yet we're paying for that through the borrowing process. So our thought was just, if there's a way when we do the financing to say, you know what, we're going to start to pay this down with whatever SREC money or incentive money we get. It's just less interest that we're paying at the end of the day. So what we did for the board, one of the other documents that we pulled out, what we came up with was another alternative. I'm sorry about that. Can you see that?
That still funny.
Crystal clear.
And again, this was just what we were trying to model, was trying to get to the point where if we can find a way in the financing where the cost that we're paying for the debt over time is less than what we would have been saving anyway, naturally, just by the energy bill, right? Then the SRECs are out of the equation, at least from a financial perspective, right? That's just all in. So if we're saving $300,000 a year in just energy costs, and we're able to do the financing over time, where if we took some early SREC money and put it against the loan, and now we're only borrowing $4.5 million, obviously all in, right, as soon as it's right down by the cost of borrowing.
That just seems a lot safer, right? Because you get your SREC money in the bank.
If it's up front, yeah.
Right.
And that's what I said, the timing of, the things that we don't know are the exact, that are still out there, the exact size of the project, right? It might shrink a little bit, could very well shrink a little bit over time, and that's something to consider. The timing of how they get that money, because the board also at one meeting, the board had been introduced to the idea of that bonus SREC. Remember that? So that was if, those were kind of these numbers here.
So Carol, when we get to the point and actually have engineering completed and all the final numbers, is that when we sit down to figure out the best of these
Yes.
scenarios to go with?
Yes.
And if I'm remembering correctly, we've talked about that a while ago, the best scenario would be get the SREC money up front, so you're not borrowing money. You get all those SRECs, kind of, you get the money, so you don't have to worry about them going away. You're borrowing a lot less money, such that our annual savings pays the debt service on the loan, and
That's the idea.
I mean, that would be the scenario we'd want.
Right, so that's what the agreement that we came to on, last week, is that they thought they could write language to model that. We haven't seen the language yet, but I expect to see it this week.
Because and the bonus SREC is what really prompted that thinking, right? Because if you get, $4 million right off the bat, why would you finance
Right.
7 point? Right. So that was kind of what made the board start thinking.
That's the one I remember. So it was 4.2 in bonus. There's still a 700 of that other credit, so that's over 5 million on a 7/8, so we're only borrowing 3 point something. 2.8? Yeah, yeah.
But consistently, even without the bonus, that other spreadsheet that was kind of just showing that cost. The only bad thing about that, again, was that maybe paying for some additional interest that is not necessary, and the fact that in those, there were a few years, although as a whole, it's always a positive venture because the energy savings is there and the SRECs are there. There was also that piece of, well, this doesn't, there may be a way to do this so that none of those years in and of themselves come out negative as well. That was obviously was one of the things the board was trying to get at as well, so.
I thought it was in the April meeting or maybe the meeting in February or this, the 2 meetings, at least this spring. Kurt was gonna, there was a timing thing around whether or not we were gonna qualify for the bonus S. Have we heard from him? I thought he said we had it, but I don't remember for sure.
We was waiting for legislation, really.
Right, June 4th is when the legislation actually came through. And I don't know, I glanced at it, what it did is established a fixed SREC credit per kilowatt hour, which went from $77 to $93. And then now there's an inverter rebate, so each panel or row of panels has several inverters in there. So there's more incentives, but there's actual legislation that defines how much that SREC would be. But I'd have to follow him up with him on a bonus SREC.
What's the assumption we made there? What's the minimum SREC? Working on that first assumption?
Up there, is it $44? Have to look. I'm going to stand up and look.
44.60.
44.62.
Yeah, so this SREC value on this sheet is 44.62. We're up to $93 in SREC.
That's if we get the bonus.
No,
No?
that's not every, that's any SREC. $93 in SREC.
Let me pull the other document just to make sure.
We do, like we did
Yeah.
in April, present the $93 version to the.
Pay off down in-
Whether they go up or down.
Well, they're fixed
But we know-
now,
but
they're
we know where
fixed.
Oh, they're fixed.
So it
Oh,
is
they will be, yeah.
fixed according to what Curtis told me, according to the legislation, it's a fixed amount now.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Better than what we.
how, what was the timing you thought? So when that final contract with all the final stuff is finalized, that comes back here, correct?
That comes back here, the project gets bid,
Yeah.
so the
that's when-
project costs can go down.
Sure.
John mentioned that the size could go down, but also the actual cost of the project could go down. PSI has bought these solar panels before the tariff went into effect and is storing those. So, for example, if Warren didn't move forward with it for some reason, they could do some, there'd be another person behind to do something with that. But they have been bought before the tariffs went into effect. So they're in storage right now. So, once we get that 45-day letter, the impression I think that both Mike and I got was that there were not many roadblocks moving forward with the permitting process. The arborist, like I said, has been here, they've identified a grove of trees. I don't know what a grove of trees could be, I think it's a grove of 6 trees maybe. And that would have to get moved. But that would factor into the cost, which is why once everything's done and the design's all done, then they go out and bid it.
We should probably put a alternative energy committee meeting on the calendar and somewhat try to time it, right? So we can have.
Right after the 45-day letter?
So we can have we have just a lot more in-depth conversation. Oh, I'm looking at you.
Carol's like,
You're looking at the
yeah,
wrong
let me write that on my
Carol's making a
calendar.
note for Mike. And so, Carol, is Steve the contact at Hodges?
I left him a message today, just to get an update, and he hasn't been back to me yet, but I'm sure.
How, we don't know this, I guess, because we would bid it out. Once we get the engineering, and I like the idea of reviewing some sort of a public forum or whatever to communicate and answer questions and so forth. Are we breaking ground in fall or in spring, or? I can't imagine this taking
We would be permitted in 6 months or less.
Yeah.
4 to 6 months is what they told us for permitting.
Oh, so it'd be
But
6
so,
months from today is Christmas.
process is they've got a machine with GPS that bores the holes for the actual mounts, but it's not a big construction project.
No, no.
So, as long as the ground's not frozen, I'm sure they'll make it work.
Roll call.
Motion by Munda, second by Wilson. Mr. Walls?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mrs. Conway?
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Munda?
Yes,
And Mr. Drake?
Yes.
6 yes, motion carries.
yes. It's terrible, isn't it?
That was great review.
Yeah,
All the architectural stuff done, and we did some drawings. Little meeting.
Thought he could maybe.
It's all good, though.
Did you hear the rain?
Oh, yeah, I was waiting for the rain to come through the lights.
I'm a little worried. Yeah? First time on, is it raining or did somebody turn on the?
Hey, Mike, when you get settled in,
Table?
when we do it off the equipment, you got to taste. Exactly right, exactly right. I'd like to sit down with you and maybe fine tune and